Welcome to Corpus Linguistics with WordSmith 8. My name is Michaela Malberg, and before we start, just let me mention some technical things. During the webinar, we will turn off the chat. We keep it open for now if you want to say hi to the group or anything else you want to mention at this point, but we'll then switch it off later so that we can focus on the Q&A function. And when I say we, that's Viola Wiegand and myself. Thank you, Viola, for supporting the event today. Now, I'm absolutely delighted that Mike Scott agreed to this webinar. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
We planned the first part of this event originally as a full-on interview. And then when Mike and I talked about the kind of questions I wanted to ask him, it turned out that some of them would really benefit from some visual answers. And yeah, well, it's no wonder that Mike immediately thinks visually as he explains in his WordSmith help pages the importance of changing the shape of data to understand and notice what's going on. So we've done a bit of changing the shape here so that you get more visuals right from the beginning. Therefore, I'll just give you a brief idea of the questions Mike and I discussed in preparation for today. So importantly, obviously, I think we all want to know, how did it all start? And knowing Mike, who's got an amazing workshop at home to do woodwork, it will also be great to see how he combines his range of interests and amazing skills. As someone who has created a tool that is really widely used by the corpus linguistic community, Mike also has experience in real time of what challenges researchers face, what problems they need solving, and how trends in corpus linguistics develop. So Mike, I hope you will also share your views on these too. Okay, now, Mike, do you want to start with your responses to my questions?
Very good. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you very much for this kind invitation, an honor to be invited to do this. It's a pleasure, and greetings to all. I see old friends amongst the list of names. I'm going to now share screen, and let me hope I can actually get the right screen. I think it's this one. So let's see if that's correct. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yes, okay. And let's get started then. So WordSmith 8. I'm actually working on a 64-bit version of WordSmith 8, which is not yet ready, but which is developing, and I hope we'll have ready perhaps in a month or two. The idea of WordSmith, how did that all sort of get going? I started programming programmable calculators as a hobby in the late 1970s. I lived in Mexico, and the USA was nearby, and it was possible to buy such things at that time. Personal computers came in the early 1980s, but a very influential and important character in this connection was Tim Johns. Data-driven learning, and you know all about Tim Johns as a language teacher and an expert. He advised me which computer to buy. He devised a computer program called Micro Concord, and we eventually ended up working on it together and published it in 1993. And that was basically, as the name suggests, was on a microcomputer and it did a concordance. And that's really all it did. There was a student of mine from Malaysia, Fadila, and she said that she would like to study the vocabulary of text, and she needed word lists to see whether the words that students were learning in Malaysia were repeated. Unit 1's vocabulary, did it get repeated in Unit 2 or Unit 3 or Unit 4? And was there really a decent chance for the Malaysian students to actually learn the words if they didn't, perhaps they didn't get exposed to the same words again, or they got exposed to too many new words and didn't get a chance to learn them? And that was what she wanted to investigate. So I thought, well, let's see if we can make a word listing program to kind of go with Micro Concord. And that's really where the whole process started. In 1996, I was due to give a talk at the University of Liverpool, and I hadn't prepared it, and I'd made a word listing program, and I decided that it would be fun to compare word lists with each other, and compared, in the first case, a little Guardian story about racehorsing and who had won the race, with a collection of Guardian stories. And the words that popped out as being statistically significant in some way was a very basic chi-square procedure, popped out. And that was the germ of an idea which came into the keywords procedure. So that was an early state. And of course, that gave me the chance of having a concordance program and a word listing program and a keywords program in WordSmith Tools version 1 all those years ago. Since then, of course, there have been a number of different writes and rewrites, getting to WordSmith 8 in 2020. In 2004, I had to do a big rewrite because Microsoft changed various things, and there were quite obvious inadequacies in WordSmith 1, 2, and 3 that needed addressing, and so on. And basically, I'm at the same stage again in WordSmith 8. I'm developing the 64-bit. Just for your information, this, when it does come out, I hope it'll come out in a month or two. Your license, if you've got a WordSmith 8 license, it will work with the 64-bit. It doesn't mean I'm immediately going to start charging you money. So all through this period, every few weeks, there would be a new build produced. Well, why was that? It was partly because I saw something that needed doing, but often because people had generously and courageously had written to me and said, could it do such and such? And quite often I hadn't got any idea as to what that such and such could be, or why it would be. I remember, a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, somebody wrote and said, could a word list not all be in capitals? Could you have a word list where, you know, it was case sensitive? And I had never even thought of the idea of that. And people were writing from countries I'd hardly heard of, saying, I'm studying the national literature, and is it possible for me to concordance the poetry of blah, blah, blah? And so, of course, all of these things implied quite a big challenge. It was constantly difficult to incorporate new things as I went along. If you can imagine that the kind of code that I wrote at the beginning was simple and small, it kind of grew complicated because I had to build in all these extra things that seemed to be needed. That makes me think a bit about tools and tool making, and Michaela kindly referred to my interest in a workshop, my workshop. This is an animal which apparently makes tools, the New Caledonian crow. It will pick up a piece of stick and use it to poke into somewhere to get insects that it wants to eat. And so we're not the only species on the planet that makes tools. In my case, this is my workshop. It's a big mess, as you can see. That's rather the way I am with most of the time. My desk and my room and my workshop are quite messy. And this is the sort of thing that I tried to make. So this was what I was doing the other day, making some candlesticks. And this is a candlestick I made earlier as I gave my grandson last Christmas. He seemed to be quite pleased with it. So I've been interested in DIY and tool making, or tools and tool making form part of my interest as a sort of hobbyist. Anyway, you can see that coming along. Now, if we think about that a bit more, well, you've got a candlestick like that. That's rather an elegant one, actually. Could you develop a candlestick? You know, I'm drawing in a kind of an analogy of how WordSmith itself needed changing. So here's one that I actually found, which I thought was quite interesting. It's the only candlestick I could find on Google Images that has some specific alteration. As you can see, as the candle burns down, something's going to pop forwards, and that cup on the top is going to kind of come over and put out the candle flame. That seems to be the only development of candlesticks. And in general, people don't need to develop candlesticks. But I went a bit mad thinking, what else could you have? You could have a device to catch the wax. Could you have a mirror to shine the light sideways? Could you have an arm on a candlestick to make it illuminate the ceiling? Well, these are the sorts of things by analogy that people have wanted for WordSmith Tools. And of course, they then cause the thing to get quite complicated. Every time I get an addition, it gets harder and harder for me to be sure that previously saved data can still be read. The same problem that Microsoft have with Microsoft Word. I think some very early Word documents can no longer be read. You need an old version of Word to read them. And that will certainly be also true in WordSmith. I think there's going to be some old concordances from WordSmith 1 or 2, which won't be readable, but that's because I've made a mistake somewhere along the line, and some complexity has come in, and this means that the old stuff cannot be read. But that's one is a challenge, and it's something that I've kept thinking is important. So every time I go from WordSmith 6 to WordSmith 7 to WordSmith 8, I have to think, if I make something more complicated, will the old version read it? No, the old version 5 won't read version 8 stuff. Will version 8 stuff read version 5 data that's been saved using WordSmith 5? And it's supposed to. There's this nice quote from Charles Babbage, who's actually, if you've never heard of him, he's in a way the father or the father of computing back in the 1850s. And he devised a difference engine, which was a kind of early calculator. He devised it. He wasn't able to make it because the technology of making little wheels in copper and so on wasn't good enough at the time. But he devised a method of making a kind of computer. So he says then, people will always try and find a snag. And they say, if you speak of a machine for peeling a potato, people will say that's impossible. And if you actually peel a potato, then they will say, well, it needs to slice a pineapple. That's been my constraint all along the line. I haven't really had many people declaring it useless in this way that Babbage obviously had happened. But I have had lots of people saying, could it please slice a pineapple? And I've got a mango here. Will it take out the pip of a mango? Which I may assure you is not an easy task at all. WordSmith cannot open up a mango. It gets more and more complicated. So that's another reason why I have decided to go for WordSmith 64-bit. It enables me to get rid of some of the stuff that has accumulated throughout the years, have a complete rewrite, and it will mean that the data of WordSmith 7 and 8 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and so on can be shared, but it won't just be straightforwardly a matter of rereading word lists and concordances. I'll have another method of making them be readable. Now I'm going to think a bit about trends, or rather Michaela asked me to think about trends through time. How do I see that trends have happened over all this long period of time since the 1990s, or even earlier, the 1980s? I think in a very simple way that at the very beginning, there was interest in concordancing and the interest largely came in corpus linguistic terms. The interest largely came from language teachers and grammarians, people studying language who either had to teach it, particularly English as a foreign language, but probably other language people teaching other languages too, and concordancing, because the idea of a concordance is in fact quite an old idea, and there are biblical concordances and so on. And so the idea of trying to find all the instances of something was one that people found attractive. At that early time, there was a lot of debate about intuition, and you looked inside your own head and you decided you could think of examples of what is correct and what isn't correct, what is possible, what is attested and what isn't attested. But of course, when corpus linguistics came about, it became much more possible to start saying, well, actually, what have we got any evidence for any of this, and what is actually attested? We need to not just wonder what's attested, or think that as a native speaker I know what's attested. In fact, the evidence in those early days was quite obvious. We often don't know. We mostly don't know, or have wrong ideas of what is attested. So let's go for evidence. So from those early stages, which of course go back well before any involvement of mine, go right back to the 1950s and 60s, concordancing and language teachers and grammarians, we get then to keywords coming, in my case, keywords coming in the 1990s, and then collocation statistics, not just finding collocates, but actually trying to say, how are these two items related to each other, and can we believe that there is a relationship or not? Corpus cleanup. Well, I put that in because it seems to me important to realize that often texts we get hold of from somewhere need a lot of cleaning up. There are serious issues in that, and it's not a very straightforward matter. Keyword databases, so keywords, and then you get a whole lot of keywords and you put them into a kind of database, and what can you do with them? And video, we'll see an example with some of these things later on. And on the right-hand side of the screen, so language teachers and grammarians at the beginning, and then literature analysts and computational linguistics, I think, has been in existence for a long time, but there was a gulf between the corpus linguist and the computational linguist, and basically didn't really meet. On the whole, the people in computational linguistics, I think it's a very gross simplification to say this, but were trying to solve problems in relation to technology and computers, and the corpus linguistics were trying to solve problems in relation to language and grammar. And now, of course, that is all burgeoned, and we're into digital humanities, and corpus linguistics is now something you see in the world of sociology and politics and medicine and so forth. So these are some of the trends, I think, the pretty basic, simple trends that seem to have occurred. Okay. Another question that I was asked was, what about reference corpora? There was a lot of talk about reference corpora, especially 15 years ago or so. And well, for my own particular purpose, when I did the keywords procedure back in 1996, thereabouts, I was always thinking in terms of a single complete text and trying to compare that with a reference corpus, and the reference corpus would obviously have to be bigger because it would have to represent something. What you would get out of the keywords procedure would not be anything which is the normal things that people interested in grammar would have been typically referring to at the time, because if a keyword is key in a particular text, it's key in that text. It's not key necessarily key in other texts. It's key of that text, and it's a word which somehow stands out in some way from that text. And so it's a much more kind of content-oriented procedure. Then, of course, people started comparing with sets of similar texts. And then you've got a problem. How do we deal with that when we've got a whole set of texts of say, spoken texts and then written texts, or academic writing versus, say, catalogue entries or something like that? How do you compare them? I no longer think that the reference corpus needs to be bigger, but it still must be representative of something if you're going to try to compare two sets of text. Another issue that came up is, what about digital humanities? Well, I don't actually, so to speak, work with digital humanities. I think Michaela is much better qualified to be able to tell us about that. But this is my rather simple understanding of these matters. Use of Corpora is becoming, or has already become, a standard. It's in a way something that people would regard as, historians, for example, would regard as Corpora as useful tools, useful parts of their professional equipment. Not all of them will use it, but I think most of them will recognize that Corpora are relevant, could be relevant, and that some of their colleagues use Corpora a lot. That's a big development. We now live in a world where you Google something and you get a kind of, basically a pretty simple sort of concordance coming out. And we've all realized that, and we're all doing it. For the last, say, 20 years or so, it's become absolutely standard. So it's not surprising that in the world of geography or medicine or psychology or politics, Corpora should become standard. It's not just nerds anymore. It was. I think I was a nerd, or perhaps I still am a nerd. You know, way back, that was only a few of us were interested in this sort of thing, and it was a bit like me having a hobby of turning wood in a workshop. By the way, the wood that I turn, I don't have a lathe in my workshop at all, but I go to a place in Nailsworth every Tuesday afternoon, and I did some more of that yesterday and finished off those two candles that I was showing you earlier on. There's still a tendency, I think, to hope that the software gives you answers to things. And I think this is something that we have been saying it ought not to be the case, but people still find that, you know, there's a big tendency for this. So software gives you pointers. Software points you to somewhere. You've got to look and see where it leads you, and then you've got to study and see how you will make up your answer. It's not the software that will give you the answer, and it seems to me to be relevant to say that in connection with this topic of digital humanities. I'm a bit scared that naturally enough we can only learn a certain amount of anything, and why should historians, say, become real experts in computational or corpus linguistics? That's going to be very difficult for them. They've got to be experts also in the 17th century or whatever it is they're real specialists in. So there's a big danger of thinking that the software will just give you the answers, or I plug this in, I feed my software with some text or with a collection of something, and then it'll give me the answers. It's not as simple as that. It would be the same thing with applying the other way around. If we were all to become sort of pseudo experts in history, we would probably say very naive things that historians would say, no, it's not as simple as that. You've got a misapprehension there, and think again. Corpus linguistics in the future, well, God knows what's going to happen in the future. I think there's already a coming together of computational linguistics and corpus linguistics, and thank goodness for that. I think there's a recognition generally of evidence being important in all sorts of fields. You see it in this pandemic that we've been struggling with. There's been a lot of talk about evidence and governments wanting to propose certain things and then the scientists being consulted and the newspapers reporting what the scientists, the TV people interviewing them and saying, interviewing the politicians and saying, actually, have you got any evidence that this will work? Or what is the evidence? Have you decided this with evidence? And they constantly say, yes, we've been following the science. So whether they have or not been following the science, we know, and the journalists know, and the academic world knows full well that evidence is really important. And it's judging things on the basis of evidence, I think, in medicine and in government, knowing whether certain policies work or don't work. And the same will apply to sociology and music and all the fields that we can think of. So that's, I think, a very naive and simplistic view of where corpus linguistics may go or is going in the future. In terms of my own developments in WordSmith, I look back to see what are the things that have come into WordSmith over the last few years. And I'm going to show you some of these things. Scripting is where you get WordSmith just simply to follow a little script and produce data for you. Multi-word unit conversion is the idea is to be able to handle things like Los Angeles and New York and be able to treat those as single items. TED Talks is about video. We'll see an example of that in a minute. Boilerplate text is when we're thinking about standard pieces of text which get repeated and repeated and repeated in certain sources of text. Boilerplate means sort of ready-made chunks of text that people in certain professions need to have. And for example, if you've got a problem with your telephone or your TV or anything really, then you typically get a response saying, thank you for drawing this to our attention. You get a standard piece of boilerplate text which either a computer or a person will put in an answer to you to sort of smooth things over. And then eventually, if you're lucky, they'll address the issue you're interested in. Relevance filter is where you're looking to see whether a set of texts can be scored according to their contents, to how relevant they are for a particular issue you're trying to investigate. Text dispersion keyness is a fairly new idea, and we'll show an example of that. Keyword database timelines and looking at exporting timelines in a video format and various other things like that. These are the things that we're going to be having a look at in a minute when we do a demonstration. I think that's probably the end of my PowerPoint. No, nearly 64-bit. Yes, so 64-bit WordSmith. This is one view of what it might begin to look like when it's out. There's a word list appearing, very standard sort of appearance, really. And it's possible to have different colors in the display. So that is a very dramatic sort of red and black color scheme. I don't think I like it very much, but the choice that people will have as to what sort of view they'll get. But the functions will be basically the same sort of functions as in WordSmith 8 that you've used. But as I said, it will be a kind of complete rewrite. Okay, that I think is the end of my PowerPoint. And now we can start the demonstration. Oh, shared window is closed. Let me just see. Let me see if I've got the right window there. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry, folks, I'm going to have to go back and change the share. That one. Okay, I think that's correct. Viola, is it correct? You should see
Yes,
my
we can.
WordSmith in the top right-hand corner and the whole screen of, including the word Zoom
Yes, and
and
another
my
window.
emails.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll hide my emails. I don't think they are particularly relevant for now. Okay, and hide that too. Okay. Now we've got WordSmith, and the idea now is to do a little demonstration of some of the features that I mentioned. I'm going to show you scripting first, I think. So I'm going by lack of response, basically. I get quite a lot of people responding when there, especially when there are bugs, to things they use. And so I get very little feedback on scripting, and I suspect that's because people don't know it exists or have never tried it. Scripting function is where you write a little script and you say, I want it to perform certain actions. So here I've got a sample script, and we're going to just have a look first and see what is in this sample script. Now, I've got a whole lot of lines here that you can see. The first line says, remove any semicolons before any lines which you wish to process. So the first line without a semicolon says concord, corpus equals, x text Dickens hard times.txt, node equals hard, and output equals ctemp hard.cnc. So basically it's an instruction saying, please make a concordance of the Dickens novel Hard Times and do the concordance on the word hard and save it in ctemp as hard.cnc. Right. All of the other things have got semicolons, so they're instructions that I've written before, but I'm ignoring now. So I'm going to just run it, and there it's done it. So it loaded the file. It found 50 examples of hard in that novel, and it saved it in ctemp. Now let me go to ctemp and find it. I have to pull it over onto the screen so you can see. Right now, where's temp? There we go. And hard. It's there in ctemp. I'm just going to drag it over onto the WordSmith. And there is what it made. Right? It's just made an ordinary concordance, and it's a normal concordance just like any other, except that we didn't need to start concord up. And if you look at the notes, you will see when it was made and what the various settings were and what was found and so on and so forth. The notes are very useful. You can add stuff to the notes and write your own settings or your own details as to what you think is important, and that can get saved in the data. Okay, so we did that. Right, let's just try another. I'm going to go back to my sample script, and now I'm going to put a semicolon in there, and I'm going to make an ordinary word list. Okay, all right, let's just try that and see, and run it. It's complaining. X text Shakespeare all reformatted txt not found. Let's have a look and see why. Okay, go to X, find text, find shakes all reformatted txt. Right, I've got to the right place. That's what I told it to, where I told it to go. There's a folder called comedies, another called historical, and so on. There's a zip file in there which I didn't say use a zip file. I said, let's just check what it was I said. I said use X text and I use asterisk txt. I didn't refer to any zip file. What I didn't do was I didn't say, by the way, there could be in subfolders. So in historical, there's, there's lots of stuff in there. Now, the trouble with that is there is the first part of King Henry IV as a play, but this particular collection of text has all the characters' speeches as well in subfolders. So that makes life quite complicated. I don't really want to have a word list of each of the characters separately, or I may do for some other purpose at some other time. But what I would actually like to do is get all the history plays, all the comedies, and all the tragedies. That's what I really want. So let's try. That one didn't work. Let's put a semicolon before it. Let's try this one. This has got a bit more complicated syntax. So it says word list corpus equals X text shapes all reformatted txt asterisk.txt. So it's the same place. And then it says include underscore subfolders. Then it says excluded subfolders equals quotes asterisk underscore characters. So don't go there. Anything that's called something characters, ignore that and put the output into C temp Shakespeare list. Right? Now let's try that. So I will save that and try again. Okay, so let's run. It's loaded 37, right? And you can see a progress bar going across here as it's doing the work. And so it's now making a word list. And with any luck, it should have it there in a minute. It found 27,000 different types, and it's saved ctemp Shakespeare.lst. We could open that if we wanted. It will do the job. So what did we do? We had to say include subfolders and exclude certain subfolders. And finally, I'm going to just show you this one. Put a semicolon on there, and then take that one off. Now we're doing exactly the same thing with the same reformatted text, with the same include subfolders, same excluded subfolders. The same output folder is called ctemp Shakespeare. That's a folder, and it says Excel format equals true. So before we didn't say Excel format at all, so it didn't save in Excel format. But now it will, and it also says one at a time equals true, which means do the word list one at a time. Let's see what.
Mike, there was one question just on how you selected the file. A participant just wanted to know how you selected the file.
Selected which file then? I didn't. How is it selected? Well, the corpus comes from drive X. There, right? So I didn't do any selecting of the files. I didn't do the normal process. If you go into Concord or word list, and the first thing it says is select the files. But here I'm giving it a command saying, I've get a little written command. That's the whole point of this scripting thing, is I've given a written command, and the first word says, use the word list tool. Don't try any other tool. The second one says corpus equals, and then that tells you where to go, where to find it, and what you want. The third bit says include any subfolders, data from any subfolders. And the fourth bit says don't bother about certain subfolders if they've got certain names in them. And then the next bit says, where do we want to put it? And then these two further commands. Right, so I hope that's a bit clearer. Right, let's save that and let's try again now. So now we've got 37 texts loaded. Okay. And a long pause, nothing seems to be happening. Worked fine this morning. Is it going to give me trouble? Oh, 37 files saved. I didn't get much progress report there. It took a time to do it. It says 37 files saved. It doesn't really say anything about where they are or how to get at them. Where were they? Where did I say I wanted them? Well, I wanted them to go, where's the output? In C temp Shakespeare. Let's go and have a look and see what we've got in C temp Shakespeare. So let's put temp in here. There's Shakespeare. Ah, now there you go. We've got a whole lot of Excel files. So there's Antony and Cleopatra. Let's have a look at that. And there you've got a word list in Excel of Antony and Cleopatra. It seems to be in alphabetical order. So you've got the frequencies and so on all given to you, but it's not the same as a word list in WordSmith. If you want to put them into frequency order or some other order, that's up to you. You probably can do it in Excel, but I just wanted to show you how that can work. So there are various different kinds of things that one can do with scripting.
Don't want to interrupt too much, but a quick one that is easy to answer now is Andrew Hardy asks, what is the scripting language?
It isn't. It's let's look here. If you at any time you're not sure what to do or not sure how to do something, you right click and then you've got context help. You've got a help system. Oh, let's come up here. Drag it over onto the correct screen. Now this is the same help system as you've got online, right? And it's in the page which tells us how to do it. So it gives a list of syntax terms. It's a very simple, very crude and simple list, and probably gives examples. Yeah, there are examples there too, telling you what to do. But it's not a very complete big language. It's just a simple language which will do that job. Okay. Are we ready to move on to something else? Okay. Now I'm going to close that and let's see if we can do a video. So I'm going to do a concordance and let's see. TED Talks. Right, I'm going to choose this TED Talk by Ken Robinson. I can't see anything in there. That's because I've got TXT selected. And now I can see the actual texts, because these ones I want the English one. There, it's a TED Talk where he spoke in English. Okay, and there's my text selected. And I'm going to choose the word education for this. And let's see what happens. There we have a concordance of a particular speech, which I've got hold of the transcript of from a TED Talk. I can't hear any of this or see any of this. It's all I got is a normal concordance as if it was any other text. So it didn't do what I would like it to do in the way of being able to actually see how this speaker pronounces this word education, or what they say about it or anything else. So let's just close that. It didn't do what we need. We need to use a tag file. So we need to use some markup that's present in the text. Let me see if I can find it for you so you can see. There's the TED Talks. There is Ken Robinson. There is the English, and I'll pull it up into Notepad. Right, there is the text. Okay, so he starts out by saying, "Good morning, how are you?" Laughter. "It's been great, hasn't it? I've been blown away by the whole thing." And it starts at 8 seconds, then 12 seconds, and 13 seconds, "It's been great," and 16 seconds, "I've been blown away by the whole thing." And that's the markup that's in this particular text, which helps Wordsmith to know where to jump to if it wants to play a video. So I've got to actually tell it. Oh, the syntax was, it says start equals. Let me just get that back again so that we check it. Yes, it says angle bracket start equals 8, close angle bracket, start equals 12, start equals 31, close brackets. That's how the syntax works. Right, so we need a tag file, and we need to load one, and the one that comes with your Wordsmith 8 is called SRT video. And if you just load it, it is a video. It will understand a tag which starts with an angle bracket and has START equals and then something, and then a closing angle bracket. And that's how it knows what to do. So we've loaded it, right? Now, with any luck, if we go back to the concordancer and we try again, then we should get it. There we go. Still got the same concordance. It's got some markup in there. You can see start equals 88 there. Let's just listen to that. If I double click here on tag.
But if you are, and you say to somebody, no, say, "What do you do?" and you say you work in education, you can see the blood run from their face. They're like, "Oh my God, why me?"
See, I chose this line. You say you work in education, you can see the blood run from their face. Did you did the sound work? Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, let's just try another example. Okay, here's a line where he's talking about creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. So let's try that one. Double click here on the tag column.
So I want to talk about education, and I want to talk about creativity. My contention is that creativity now is as important in education as literacy.
That's lovely. I've just been given a cup of tea. Brilliant, thank you. And we'll try one more. There we go. More people will be graduating through education than since the beginning of history. That sounds like quite a dramatic claim.
According to UNESCO, more people worldwide will be graduating through education than since the beginning of history. More people. And it's the combination of all the things we've talked about, technology and...
Right, so what happens when we do that? We get to see the video, we get a little section of the video, you can play it slower or faster, and you can go back a bit and so on, the various things you can do. But it's the same as an ordinary concordance, but you get the chance to see and hear as well. Now, there are several requirements here. First of all, you have to have a video. Secondly, it has to be in some format that Wordsmith knows about. I can't remember where to do that. Here, probably. Well, somewhere in there, there's a place where there's a form where you have to be able to tell it that MP3 or MP4 or whatever type of video you plan to watch. I mean, some of the standard ones will be already in WordSmith when you download it from my site. But if you've got a video in a different format, you'll have to find the relevant form and fill in the detail. So there's that, and then of course the syntax has to be right. You have to find the actual tag that says start equals and then some number, and that number is seconds, and so on. This is quite complicated. If you find a TED talk, for example, it's easy to find lots of TED talks. It's not difficult to find transcripts of them in various languages. To get them to match up, you have to do a procedure using the text converter in WordSmith, which I'm not going to show you now because it's a bit complicated. I'm going to make it easier to do in the new version of WordSmith, but it's a little bit complicated to do, but it is possible to do. And so that's something which I think is of interest. Now, how many of us have opportunities to access Corpora? All of us. How many of us have opportunities to access Corpora with video? Not many. There aren't very many collections with sound files or video files, but why not? You know, it's pretty relevant. We spend a lot of our spare time watching the TV, especially now in pandemic times, so you know, our written corpora are really incredibly limited, you know, they've always been limited, and we cut out equations, we cut out sounds, we cut out pictures, you know, we also, of course, we live in a world where it's just reading, silent reading, that's only a very faint reflection of the real world. However, so I just thought that might be of some interest to people. Okay, video, right. I'm not going to bother saving that one. And what else was I going to do? Let's try making a word list index. So we say we want to do a word list and new. Okay, now okay, I'm going to make an index of James Joyce novel. Okay, so that I've got in Drive X, text, literature, 20th century, and it's James Joyce. And I've got some stuff in here. Right, I've got a copy of Dubliners there. Now, it is in a format which WordSmith basically doesn't like, UTF-8. It needs to be converted. There's a technical reason why WordSmith doesn't like UTF-8. It basically has to do with the fact that in UTF-8, a character can take up a varied amount of space. In UTF-16, to all intents and purposes, for nearly all languages, a character takes up a fixed amount of space, and that suits WordSmith well to be able to jump to the right location in the text and play the video file or do a concordance and so on. Makes life a lot easier if everything's in a basically fixed format. But UTF-8 is incredibly popular and common in the world, and unfortunately, UTF-8 doesn't work straight out of the tin, so to speak, in WordSmith. Not happy with it. So we might need to convert it. So how will I do the conversion? Well, what I can do is I can go to the text converter. Let me, whoops, go away from that and use a utility, the text converter, and I want to say, okay, let's choose these text files from James Joyce, and let's convert them. And we have to activate this to say we actually want to do it. And we want to convert them into Unicode. And we don't really need to do any other changes at all, but we're going to convert all of those ones in the UTF-8 folder into drive C folder temp, and put it wherever we like. We can change the word Joyce to, you know, hello. Let's say I'm going to put it in there. It means nothing. I'll eventually take the text out, but this is where it's going to go. It's safer to convert things into another place, because if something goes wrong with the conversion, and somebody showed me today, or Zerny showed me today, something that is wrong in WordSmith converting text of text, Windows text in Portuguese, and that's not working correctly, but it is working okay with UTF-8. So we're going to do this conversion now. And so we say, yes, we want to do this, 3 files. Let's get them all converted. And there they are converted, and Dublin is amongst them. And if we double click, it opens up and we can look at it. That's the converted version, because we clicked on the right-hand side. If we click on the left-hand side, we'll see the unconverted one. Okay, so we've succeeded in converting, and it's in a folder called ctemp hello. Okay, so let's do that. Now I'll go back to word list and go file new and change my Shakespeare stuff. And I'm not going to use that Dubliners. I'm going to use what I put into ctemp. Hello, wasn't it? It's somewhere in there. There we go. So it's clear, and choose Dubliners. So what I did was I converted a text which was in a format that's not very desirable. I made a copy into drive C folder temp hello of this text. I've got it here. Let's just check that it's really in Unicode. Yes, it is. How did I check? I pressed that button, which is like a brush, and that helps us to check to see whether the text is in a good format. Seems okay. So now we can actually make a word list here. That you're all familiar with doing that, but I'm going to call this one Dubliners. Dubliners, okay. And it's going to go into this particular folder. Well, it's making an index. Now, what is an index? A word list is just a list of words, all the words that come in this particular novel. An index looks the same. So the words that look very much the same, and you find the same sort of statistics as in an ordinary word list. So the most frequent word is the, and it comes 4,000 times and represents 6% of the text. The most frequent verb seems to be said. Okay. Now, an index actually knows not only that said comes 755 times, it also knows what words came next to said, left and right. So we can do things with an index that we can't do with an ordinary word list. So now we say, okay, I want to compute, say, word clusters, n-grams. Well, many people will have already done this sort of thing. So I take all the words and I want clusters to go between 3 and 4 n-gram of either 3-word n-gram or up to a 4-word n-gram. Now, I wanted to draw your attention to this maximum frequency. At 1.5 means don't bother with the and of and to, because those have a frequency of more than 1.5, the frequency percentage. So their in has a frequency percentage of 1.57. Why am I doing that? Well, it's because I actually don't want to know all the clusters that start with the or and or of. These these words are probably not relevant to me. It take longer, and I just don't want to see. I don't want to see them. That's basically the idea. This one, stop at sentence break, is saying, you know, if you're looking for a cluster of words, don't go over a sentence break to find it. Okay, let's see it making the word list. There we go. It's made a sequence. Now it does contain that sequence there contains but it doesn't start with the. So it found it because it was looking for out. Okay. Now what I wanted to show you really was go back to the index. We've got the frequency list of the 3-word and 4-word items. We've got them in alphabetical order in the same way as we normally would have with a word list. We've got the index view, which looks like a single word list. And now what I actually want to do is I want to compute relationships, which enables me to look at certain statistics. What I have a possibility here, I have various statistics telling you about how one word might be related to another. And these are various settings which I can set. And I can say the word can appear if any of these tests reach the threshold, this threshold. I've got a threshold for the MI cube test of 3.0, a threshold for mutual information of 3.02, and so on. So if a word meets any of these thresholds, it should appear. And various other settings too. What words do I want to work on? Well, I could just work on the word said. I would choose that if I did, but I'm going to choose all the words, and let's set the thing working. And it goes through the alphabet looking at all the words, and then it will try to compute the relationships. And so what we're getting here is a whole set of statistics. So if we look at this particular column, say the MI cube column, it's unsorted. It seems to suggest that there's a relationship between your and the, which scores 8.11, and young and man, let's say, which scores 15. If we sort them, so we sort them by this particular statistic, MI cube, and the first sort and the second sort is alphabetical, then let's see what we get. So we get Mary seems to be related to Jane, Mary Jane, right? This is, remember, this is a novel by James Joyce, so it's very probable that there's a character called Mary Jane. It looks as if the gap between Mary and Jane is one word long, which is what you kind of expect. We seem to have some garbage in here. Project Gutenberg, Aunt Kate, Ignatius Gallagher, said Mr., and so on, Freddie Malins. We've got various characters coming along, but these are the ones that the system is saying belong together in some statistical sense. And in this particular case, it's probably not surprising. They're characters, aren't they? And the gap is small. You can sort on all the different columns very easily just by clicking at the top and reordering them. You can choose the different statistics. So you say, I want to sort by T-score, and that will, again, order them differently, and you'll get slight difference in the ordering. Okay, I wanted just to show you that. Some of the people watching today probably already used that sort of thing, and it's not a great novelty, but anyway, there you go. I'm not going to save that. Let's move on. Oh, that could be saved as an Excel spreadsheet. I didn't show you that, but anyway. Let's have a look now at the set column. Let's see what we did with that hard concordance. No, I know, I'll do it with a word list. That's easier. Right, so let's take a word list. Okay, there's the Shakespeare that we made earlier. Okay, and we got a word list. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to compute color categories. Now, for color categories, the idea is that we want to be able to find words that meet certain requirements and put them into a color which will pick them out from the others. So let's take the word column, because that's what I'm going to be interested here. I could take one of the number columns, but I'm taking the word column. And what do I want to find? Well, for example, I want to find any case where the word ends in ness. Okay, so that's my criterion. That's my search requirement. So my condition is the word column text ends with ness. I'm going to choose this red color, or maybe I'll choose this dark orchid color, and I'll add a search. So I've chosen the requirement, and I've chosen a color to go with it. And now I'm going to find all, and it's found 257. 257 of them. Okay, but I can't see them. These are words that end in ness, aren't they? Okay, so let's try sorting the column. And yeah, there we go. So we've got a whole lot of words that end in ness, all colored. Okay, and it goes on down. And then after them, we've got the rest of the words that don't end in ness. Okay, and we could have a second criterion. We could say, let's try something else. Well, you've got lots of possibilities here. You've got, for example, the length of the text is below ness. That doesn't make sense. The length of this of the words is below, let's say, 6. Right, let's try that one and see if it works. Actually, let's try negative. So not the length of the word is below 6. So it would have to, these are going to be words which are long in some way, longer than 6. Let's see if that works. So I've chosen that as a requirement, and I'm going to color those a different color. Let's say lawn green. Oops. Where's it gone? Goldenrod, that'll do. And there they are. And if I leave these things there as they are, it will do both these searches again. If I don't want it to do this one, I can just untick that, or I can even delete it and get rid of that one. And I could let's delete it, and let's even clear the colors so that all of those colors have gone. Now we'll do another one. So let's do a search for the word. The length of the word is not below 6, and let's see if that works. So it's found 22,000, right? So these are the words that are longer than 6 letters long. You get the idea. Now you could have two more criteria, but this again is something which not many people have written to me about. So I think it's a way of sort of going further into your word list or your colloquial list. You can do this with the colloquial list or any other list. It's called compute color categories, and that's where it's found there in the compute color categories place. Okay. All right, now I'm going to go into a keyword database, and on that one, this is a database that I've been working on with a colleague, and it's of climate change text, and it basically looks at some climate change text from the whole month of January 2005 right down to the end of 2018. And so in one text, there's a 1 month's worth of news stories which have been filtered to be relevant to climate change in this particular corpus of downloaded from LexisNexis. And a database has been made of that. And this is the timeline. It seems to take a few seconds to jump into position. Okay, so what we've got here is a timeline where, say, the word Copenhagen comes up. There's a great big bump up here in 2009, Copenhagen, because it obviously there was a COP conference, which actually was a rather large failure in 2009. The Paris one was a great success in 2015, and we're hoping that Glasgow this year will be a great success too, and the world will actually take climate change seriously. There we get a great lot of mention of Trump, because basically whoever is the American president gets a lot of mentions in pretty well any collection of text. There's Paris coming, and so on. So you can see how timelines are operating in relation to this particular set of texts. They can be sorted in various ways. So if you click on the top bar, then you can say, okay, I want to see what was prominent in 2009 and what, but it has to have been in, say, at least 2 periods or 3 periods, 3 of those years, but please order them by their prominence, first of all, in 2009. So there it's sorted, and we get the conference, big surprise, in 2009, negotiations, Obama's there, India, and so on. These are things which occurred in 3 years. There are various different ways of sorting, in other words, a display like this. This is all based on a keyword database. Okay, now, sorry, there I was just right-clicking, and these are some of the things that one can do, like get a concordance or see relationships and so on. The standard functions, get an Excel spreadsheet. I don't think an Excel spreadsheet of timelines will work very well, but an Excel spreadsheet of the database itself should work. Okay, let's just try that. There we go, and let's see what we get. And it's made one, and it says, do you want to see it now? And there it is. It's got the data in an Excel spreadsheet. So you've got Excel spreadsheet basically as a function for almost every kind of set of data that you've got in WordSmith. Okay, now let me just refresh my memory. What was I going to do? Various sorts. Oh yes, one other thing that's quite recent is exporting. Go back to the timeline. There we go. And export the data as images. So this is where it's going to get exported in different segments of the different periods of time from 2005, 2006, and so on, right up to 2018. And it's only going to do 31 rows of data. That's all I'm allowing it to do. And there it will do the work. And there in my file manager, I've got the data it's produced. So if we go to 2009 there, we've got a picture. And if I double click, I can see the picture, and there it is. Obviously this can be, you know, you can shrink and, oops, you can shrink and enlarge it. It's just a picture, right? But it's a way of exporting data, and the first few lines are prominent, and the bottom lines are kind of grayed out because there's not much of any interest to be seen there. So this is another recent feature that I brought into WordSmith. Right. Boilerplate text. Let's do a quick look at that. In the utilities, in the corpus checker, there's the corpus checker. Then we can look for boilerplate text. Now here I'm going to look through a particular set of data, and I'm looking for chunks of text which are at least 40 characters long and contain at least 2 repetitions. So we'll start, and it's working through, and it's looking at these various texts here, and so far it's only found 1. Looking through my climate data. Okay, I'm stopping it. I've pressed the exclamation mark, and that says, you know, that's enough, and show me what you've got, and I can go at it. And so it's got 2 copies here of this particular piece of boilerplate text. It's boilerplate text says, to find out more about the talks, follow our simple something, our simple guide. So this is an example of boilerplate text, of standard text that comes in various places. We've only got 2 examples of it here, but we've got 2 examples in the same text. Now, let's have a look and see. Okay, there is the thing it's found, and to get it to highlight them, we say highlight all, and there's one example here. You've got a little map here which shows that this particular thing, to find out more about the talks, follow our simple guide, comes down near the end, and again right pretty well at the end somewhere there again. Okay, so what's this tool doing? It's looking into a text, into a set of text, and it's looking for repeated strings. It doesn't understand anything. It's just looking for repeated strings, and it's finding some, and then it's bringing them out. So you can say this is relevant or this is not relevant. While I'm with this tool, the Corpus Checker tool, this is one that's received a little bit of sort of development in the last few 2 or 3 years. Another function it contains is relevance, where I'm looking to see how can I find, in my case, I was working with climate change text, and what actually happens is you download a whole lot of climate change text from a big database somewhere, and what you get is a lot of climate change text which makes a little tiny mention of climate change, but is really a text about something else. And then there are other texts which are very much about climate change, with lots and lots of stuff about climate change in them. And the need, therefore, was to be able to say, how can I filter out the ones which just have an incidental mention of some particular terms? And so this is a tool for doing that. Now, the text file here is one which says, well, I've given a very abbreviated name for it, that I've said it's got keywords in, it's got filters, it's in UK text, and some statistical MIQ procedure has been used to identify certain terms which I think are relevant. And here they are. So I've got things like Copenhagen and climate, or deniers and climate, and policy and climate, and so on. So these are requirements. And then I've got terms like gas and greenhouse and investors and so on. And it's quite a complicated system that I've devised of being able to say how important are these various terms to actually meet a criterion to help me to decide, are they relevant or not? It's all explained in the help, but I'm I've got a main word, I've got a context to the left, I've got the word to the right, I've got a context span, I've got any other words that might be required, and some sort of score, a value score to be attached if a text contains these things. So if the text contains change and climate within 50 words of each other, I think it is, then it will get a score of 40.03. All of these numbers came from previous data I'd done with keywords. So they were put into a big spreadsheet, and that this data is used to input to be able to do the searching. So now I'm saying, go through a whole lot of texts and don't bother if the text contain less than 200 words. Split the text into 5 segments. Anything that you find has got to be in 3 of the 5 segments, and it must have a final score of at least 10 to be worth showing me. So these are the sort of criteria for saying, you know, have a look and see what you can find. That's just, these are the texts it's going to go and search, and with any luck, it should start working.
Mike, while this is working in terms of timing, we probably have another good 5, 7, 8 minutes or so before we need to move to Q&A, because we've got quite a list.
Right, okay. I'm going to stop it there anyway, because I'm only trying to show you what sort of thing it does. This is the text which scored the highest of all. It scored 2,000 points. It's 600 words long, and it scored 42 of these various words that were criteria for scoring well. And if I say, show me the text, there if I highlight the words, then it goes through, and you see this text has got lots and lots of things about climate change in, right? And so the headline is Washington Summit, US scientists pile on pressure over climate change. This isn't one with just some incidental mention, it's one with a lot of mentions of climate change. And that is basically how I've been filtering the data collections, and it's to do with corpus cleanup. And there's your map of all the different instances of where the word comes. Okay, and it's possible to save a sample of the text as in rich text format, and so we could do that. Just save a few. I'm only saving 5 of them, and it will now make them, color them, and save them, and then we will have some saved in the end where we can actually share with somebody else or whatever. They'll be in rich text format. Okay, so these are in Corpus Checker. Let's obviously deleting ones I've done before. Yes. Okay, let's stop and find them. Corpus Checker. There we go. This is the sort of thing that we got. I think that's today, isn't it? The 9th at 1725. Yeah. So there is a Word document coming out with the text all colored up, right? So that you can see how it did the work. There are a number of other things which you could look at, but I think we should probably draw the thing now to a close. Our time is pretty well out. So thank you, and I'm sorry that I've probably exhausted your patience with all of this. Okay, I'll hand back to you, I think, Michaela.
Mm-hmm.